I've been debating whether to post this for months. I guess I need to get it off my chest because I'm exhausted, both physically and mentally. We're not sure what to do anymore, and I'm hoping someone here might have experienced something similar or have advice. My family and I have lived in our house for about 8 years now. It's a fairly modern suburban home, nothing special or historic, built in 2011, no weird history that we know of. Just a normal 4-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. When we first moved in, everything was completely normal. I was just starting high school. My sister Emma was in 5th grade, and my parents were excited about the bigger space compared to our old apartment. The first incident happened about 6 months after we moved in. I woke up around 3 in the morning with this intense feeling that someone was watching me. You know that sensation when you can just feel eyes on you? It was like that, but 100 times stronger. I remember lying completely still, trying to convince myself it was nothing, but the feeling was so overwhelming that I finally opened my eyes. There was a shadow standing at the foot of my bed. Not just darkness, but a shadow with shape, like a person, but without any features I could make out. It was just standing there, watching me. I froze completely. I couldn't even scream. After what felt like forever, but was probably only a few seconds, I pulled my blanket over my head like a little kid. When I finally got the courage to look again, maybe 5 minutes later, it was gone. I convinced myself it was just my imagination, or maybe sleep paralysis, even though I could move just fine. I didn't tell anyone because it seemed so stupid, and I didn't want my parents thinking I was making things up. But then it happened again a few weeks later, and then again. Sometimes I'd just see shadows moving in my peripheral vision. Other times I'd wake up to that same watching sensation. It wasn't every night, but maybe once every couple of weeks. The incident that really freaked me out happened when I was in middle school, about 3 years ago. My sister and I were sharing a room temporarily while our parents were renovating hers. We both woke up at the exact same time in the middle of the night. Without saying anything, we both saw this figure crouching beside my bed. It was tan-colored, not like skin exactly, more like a beige or light brown color, but definitely solid-looking, not a shadow this time. Emma whispered, "Sam, do you see that?" And I just nodded. We both dove under the covers at the same time. When we looked again, it was gone. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just in my head. Emma had seen it too. We told our parents the next morning, but they just said we probably had the same nightmare because we were sharing a room. Last night was what finally pushed me to write this post. I went to bed around 11 after finishing some homework. I fell asleep pretty quickly, but woke up suddenly at 2:17. I checked my phone. At first, I wasn't sure what woke me. Then I felt it. Something was tapping my back, like deliberately tapping with a finger. Tap, tap, tap. I froze, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was just the cat. But our cat died last year, and we haven't gotten another one. Maybe it was just the blanket moving. But this wasn't random. It was rhythmic, deliberate. 3 taps, pause, 3 more taps. I couldn't move. I was lying on my side, facing the wall, afraid to turn around. Then the tapping stopped and I felt tugging at my blanket, like something was trying to pull it down from my shoulder. I gripped it tighter, my knuckles turning white, my heart beating so hard I thought it might burst. The tugging stopped, and for a moment I thought whatever it was had gone away. That's when I felt the tapping again, but this time on my head. Light, but unmistakable. Tap, 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 right on the top of my head. I finally gathered the courage to roll over quickly and sit up, switching on my bedside lamp in one panicked movement. There was nothing there. My room looked exactly as it always did, but the air felt different, colder, heavier somehow, and I swear I could still feel the sensation of those taps on my head, like phantom touches lingering on my skin. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I just sat in bed with all the lights on, scrolling through my phone to distract myself, jumping at every little noise the house made. This morning I finally talked to my parents about everything that's been happening, not just last night, but all the other incidents too. That's when they told me something they'd been keeping from me. About 2 weeks ago, they both woke up in the middle of the night to find a grey figure crouched on top of their dresser. Not sitting, but crouched, like it was ready to pounce. They said it just stayed there, watching them for what my dad estimates was about 30 minutes. They were both too terrified to move or speak. Eventually, my mum whispered my dad's name, and the figure just disappeared. Not like it walked away or faded. It was there 1 second and gone the next. Then my mum told me about something that happened just 3 nights ago. They both woke up to see a larger, darker entity walking slowly across their room. My dad described it as like a shadow, but denser, like it was absorbing the darkness around it. It walked to their closet and then vanished. My dad got up to check the closet, but there was nothing there. When I asked why they hadn't told me about these incidents, my mum started crying. She said they didn't want to scare Emma and me, and they were hoping it would stop on its own. My dad admitted he'd been skeptical at first, thinking it was just dreams or tricks of the light, but now he's convinced there's something in our house. The weirdest part is that none of us feel threatened exactly. Whatever these things are, they don't seem to want to hurt us. They're just watching, observing. It's like living in a fishbowl, being studied by something we can't understand. We've tried a few things already. My mum bought sage after looking up house cleansing rituals online. We smudged the whole house last weekend, going room to room with the burning sage while saying prayers. It seemed to work for a couple of days. The house felt lighter somehow. But then last night happened, so obviously it didn't fix the problem. My dad checked the carbon monoxide detector to make sure it was working properly. He even called in an electrician to check the wiring, thinking maybe unusual electromagnetic fields could explain some of what we're experiencing. Everything checked out normal. Emma's been having nightmares she can't remember, just waking up crying. She's only 13, and I hate seeing her scared in her own home. Last week she asked if she could sleep with the light on, something she hasn't done since she was little. The activity seems to happen in cycles. We'll have a week or 2 of nothing, then several incidents close together. There's no pattern we can figure out, no specific times, no triggers we can identify. It's just random, which makes it even more unsettling. I've tried talking to these entities, I guess you'd call them. One night after my parents and Emma were asleep, I sat in the middle of my room and just started speaking to the empty air. I told whatever might be there that we acknowledged their presence but asked them to please stop scaring us. I felt completely ridiculous doing it, but I was desperate. For a moment, I thought I felt something change in the room, like the air pressure shifted slightly, but nothing appeared and nothing changed afterward. I've researched online about hauntings and paranormal activity, but most of what I find seems so dramatic compared to what we're experiencing. There are no objects moving on their own, no strange sounds or voices, no violent encounters, just these silent watchers that appear and disappear. Our neighbors have lived in their homes for decades, and when I casually asked if they'd ever experienced anything strange, they looked at me like I was crazy. As far as I know, no one died in our house. It's too new for that kind of history. I'm writing this the morning after the tapping incident, and I'm dreading going to sleep tonight. The house feels normal during the day, almost like I could convince myself it's all just nightmares or an overactive imagination. But when the sun sets, that feeling of being watched comes back. My mum suggested we get cameras for our rooms, but I'm not sure I want to see what they might record. What if we capture something on video? Would that make it better or worse? And what if we don't capture anything, even when we experience something happening? Would that mean we're all collectively losing our minds? I'm not sleeping well anymore. I find myself fighting to stay awake until exhaustion takes over. My grades are slipping because I'm so tired all the time. Emma's teacher called my parents last week because she fell asleep in class twice. We've talked about moving, but we can't afford it right now. My dad's company downsized last year, and he took a pay cut to keep his job. My mom's working extra shifts at the hospital to make up the difference. We're stuck here, at least for now. So we're living with these watchers, these observers, these whatever they are. We're trying to continue our normal lives during the day while dreading what might happen when we close our eyes at night. The worst part is not knowing why. Why our house? Why our family? What do these entities want from us? Are they trying to communicate something? Are they just curious? Are they even real? Or are we experiencing some kind of shared delusion? I don't know what to do anymore. We've tried ignoring them. We've tried acknowledging them. We've tried cleansing the house. Nothing works. Last night, after the tapping incident, I thought I heard a whisper just as I was turning on my lamp. It was so faint I can't be sure it was real, and I couldn't make out any words. Just a soft sound, like a sigh or a hushed voice. I'm posting this hoping someone has experienced something similar or has advice beyond the usual sage and prayers. Because right now, as the sun is setting and another night approaches, I'm sitting here wondering what's watching me from the corners of my room, waiting for me to fall asleep so it can tap me awake again. Story 6. I've never told this story to anyone outside my family. It happened before I was born, but it shaped my entire existence. My mother only shared it with me when I turned 16, and I could see the pain in her eyes even after all these years. Growing up in Rivera Village, I always wondered why my mother would sometimes pause when she heard certain guitar melodies, or why she kept a faded navy blue ribbon pressed between the pages of her Bible. I never understood why she insisted we never swim in the east bend of the river, even though it was the most popular spot for local teenagers. I finally got my answers 6 years ago, and I'm still not sure what to make of them. My mum was 17 that summer of 1985. Rivera Village was smaller then. Everyone knew everyone. According to her, she'd been watching him for months. She never told me his real name, only ever referring to him as Mr. Charming, even decades later. He had moved to our village the previous winter when his father took over the local hardware store. He wasn't like the other boys, she told me, her eyes staring off somewhere I couldn't follow. He didn't try so hard to be noticed. He just was. When he smiled, it felt like it was only for you, even in a crowded room. Mom said she never had the courage to speak to him directly. Small towns can be cruel with gossip, and she was terrified of rejection. Instead, she admired him from afar, making up excuses to visit the hardware store with my grandfather, or timing her walks to accidentally cross paths with him after school. The annual church picnic changed everything. It was always held the second Saturday of July by the riverbank, where the water was calm before it curved around the bend and picked up speed. The whole community would gather with food, music, and swimming. That day was scorching hot. The kind of heat that makes the air shimmer above the pavement. Mom had spent extra time getting ready, wearing her favorite yellow sundress and tying her long brown hair back with her treasured navy blue ribbon. My grandmother had given it to her for her 16th birthday, and it was her lucky charm. She described how her heart nearly stopped when Mr. Charming arrived carrying a guitar case. She hadn't known he played. Pastor Williams, always looking for entertainment, quickly convinced him to perform for everyone after they'd eaten. His voice wasn't perfect, Mom told me, her own voice growing soft with the memory. It had this slight rasp to it, like he'd been up all night talking with someone. But when he sang, everything else just disappeared. He played several songs, some religious, some popular tunes from the radio. But the last song was one Mom said she'd never heard before, something he'd written himself. She swears to this day that he never took his eyes off her during that final song. Everyone at the picnic noticed, exchanging knowing glances and whispers behind cupped hands. When he finished, the applause was thunderous, but Mom said she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. And then he was walking toward her, guitar still in hand, smiling that smile she'd dreamed about for months. That last one was new, he told her. I wrote it last week. Been trying to find the courage to play it for someone special. Mom said she must have looked like a complete fool, stammering and blushing. But he just laughed, not mockingly, but with genuine warmth. They talked for nearly 20 minutes while everyone else began setting up for swimming and afternoon games. He told her about his dreams of studying music in college, about how moving to Rivera Village had been difficult at first, but now felt like home. Just as others began calling for them to join the swimming, he touched her arm gently. "I was wondering," he said quietly, looking uncharacteristically nervous, "if I could come by your house later today to speak with your father." In those days, in our small community, there was only one reason a young man would formally ask to speak to a girl's father. Mom said her heart felt like it might explode. Before she could answer, he continued, "I know we haven't really talked much before today, but I've noticed you. I've been trying to work up the nerve for months." The irony wasn't lost on her. All that time, while she'd been watching him, he'd been watching her too. In a moment of boldness that Mom said surprised even herself, she reached up and untied her navy blue ribbon. She pressed it into his palm. "Bring this back to me when you come," she told him. "That's my promise, you'll be welcome." He carefully tied the ribbon around his wrist, double knotting it so it wouldn't come loose in the water. That was the last real conversation they ever had. The swimming area was divided unofficially by age and daring. Younger kids and parents stayed in the shallow section near the picnic tables. Teenagers usually swam in the deeper middle section, but the older boys, especially those wanting to show off, would swim around the bend to what locals called the jumping rocks, a series of high stone outcroppings over the deepest part of the river. The current was stronger there, which everyone knew but nobody respected enough. There hadn't been a drowning in decades, so the danger felt theoretical rather than real. Mom watched Mr. Charming join the group of boys heading around the bend. She stayed behind with her friends, occasionally glancing that way, hoping to catch glimpses of him. She could hear distant whoops and hollers as the boys took turns jumping. After about 45 minutes, a scream cut through the afternoon chatter, not an excitement scream, but one of genuine terror. Then another, and another. Everyone raced toward the bend. My grandfather, who was known as a strong swimmer, was one of the first adults to arrive. The scene was chaos. Several boys were still in the water, diving repeatedly. Others stood on the rocks, pointing and shouting directions. "He didn't come back up," one kept yelling. "He just didn't come back up." Mom said she knew immediately. Even before anyone said his name, she knew it was him. The next hours were a blur of search parties, police and divers. The current was particularly strong that day due to recent rains upstream. As darkness fell, they had to suspend the search, but it resumed at first light the next morning. They found his body 7 days later, nearly 3 miles downstream, caught in a tangle of fallen trees. The navy blue ribbon was still tied around his wrist. Mom fell into a deep depression after the funeral. For weeks, she barely ate or spoke. My grandparents were worried sick about her. Eventually, time did what it always does. It didn't heal the wound, but it made it possible to live with it. Several months after the accident, Mom asked my grandfather to teach her to play guitar. She had never shown any interest in music before, but now she practiced obsessively. It took her nearly a year, but she finally mastered the song, his song, the one he had written for her. Though she had only heard it once, every note was seared into her memory. That's when the strange things started happening. It began one night in August 1986, almost exactly a year after the drowning. Mom woke around 3 in the morning to the faint sound of guitar strumming. At first, she thought she'd been dreaming. But as she lay there in the darkness, the sound continued, soft, distant, but unmistakable. It was his song. She thought she was losing her mind, grief playing tricks on her. She pulled the covers over her head and eventually fell back asleep. But the next night at exactly 3 a.m., the same thing happened. And the next night, and the next. Sometimes the music was so faint she could barely hear it. like it was coming from the end of a long tunnel. Other times, it seemed to be just outside her bedroom window, though when she looked, there was never anyone there, just the dark silhouettes of trees swaying in the night breeze. After 2 weeks of this, she finally told my grandparents. They were concerned, but suggested it might be her way of processing grief, her subconscious creating what her heart most wanted to hear. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday in late August, raining heavily, one of those summer storms that makes the whole world smell like wet earth. The whole family was asleep when they were jolted awake by a thunderous knocking at the front door. My grandfather checked the clock. 3 a.m. exactly. He grabbed his robe and the baseball bat he kept beside the bed and went downstairs, my grandmother and Mom following close behind. The knocking came again, even louder this time, almost angry in its intensity. My grandfather called out asking who was there, but there was no answer, just another round of knocking. Finally, he approached the door, weapon ready, and looked through the peephole. "There's nobody there," he said, sounding confused. He flipped on the porch light and carefully opened the door. The rain was coming down in sheets, but the covered porch was empty. The front yard was clearly visible in the security light, and there was no one there either. No car pulling away, nothing. They closed the door, thinking perhaps it had been a prank by local kids or just the wind blowing something against the house. They were halfway up the stairs when the knocking came again. So hard the door actually shook in its frame. My grandfather rushed back down, yanking the door open immediately this time. Again, no one was there. But this time, something was different. The door had been locked after they closed it. My grandfather was certain of this. Yet now it swung open easily, as if it had been unlocked from the outside. And there, on the wooden floor of the porch, was a trail of wet footprints leading right up to the threshold. My grandmother screamed. The footprints weren't muddy. They were just water, as if someone had walked straight out of the river and up to their door. The strangest part, the footprints only went one way. There were no prints leading away from the door. It was as if whoever had made them had simply vanished, or perhaps come inside. As they stood there frozen, Mom noticed something that made her blood run cold. The wet footprints stopped exactly at the spot where a visitor would stand to speak to her father, just as Mr. Charming had intended to do that day by the river. He had come to fulfill his promise. After that night, the guitar music stopped. Mom never heard it again. The knocking never returned either. It was as if whatever unfinished business had kept him tethered to this world had finally been resolved. Mom met my dad a few years later and eventually moved forward with her life. But she kept the navy blue ribbon, not the original one, which was buried with him, but an identical one she bought afterward, as a reminder. I asked her once if she was afraid during those strange nights of music and knocking. She thought for a long time before answering. "No," she said finally. "I was never afraid. Even at the door that night, I wasn't scared. I was sad. Sad that I could feel him so close but couldn't see him, couldn't speak to him. I've tried researching what happened at the river that day. The newspaper accounts are clinical, calling it a tragic accident and warning about the dangers of the current. Nobody mentioned the ribbon on his wrist or the promise he never got to keep. Sometimes, when I visit my parents, I notice Mom still pauses when she hears certain guitar melodies. And on the anniversary of the accident, she always sits on the porch at night with her own guitar, playing his song once, softly, before going to bed. I've never heard any ghostly music myself. The house has been quiet for as long as I can remember. But every now and then, I catch Mom glancing toward the front door around 3 in the morning, as if she's still waiting for that knock, still waiting for him to return her ribbon and speak to her father at last. Story 7. I don't even know where to begin with what happened to me last month. I've been debating whether to share this for weeks now, but I need to get it off my chest. Maybe someone else has experienced something similar or can make sense of it, because I sure as hell can't. It started with what I thought was just a bad cold. I'm not one to rush to the doctor. My wife Elaine always jokes that I'd need a limb hanging off before I'd admit something was wrong, but this hit me hard and fast. One day I was fine, the next I was burning up with a fever. My sinuses felt like they were filled with concrete, and my head was pounding like someone was using it as a drum. After 3 days of suffering, Elaine practically dragged me to urgent care. The doctor took one look at me, did some quick tests, and diagnosed a sinus infection. "Nothing serious," he said. "Just take these antibiotics and you'll be fine in a few days." I filled the prescription, followed the instructions to the letter, but nothing changed. If anything, I felt worse. A week into the antibiotics, I went back. Different doctor, same diagnosis, but stronger meds. "These should knock it out," she assured me. They didn't. By this point, I was missing work, which isn't like me at all. I've worked at the same engineering firm in Riverside for 15 years, and I rarely take sick days. The exhaustion was the worst part. I've never felt anything like it, like my body was made of lead, and every movement required tremendous effort. Even keeping my eyes open became a struggle. 2 weeks after the initial symptoms, I remember sitting down on our living room couch around noon, thinking I'd just rest for a minute. I woke up disoriented at 7 that evening. Elaine was shaking me gently, looking worried. "You've been out cold for hours," she said. "I couldn't wake you up." That was the beginning of what I now think of as the 3 days. 3 days where I existed in some strange limbo between sleeping and waking. I'd drift off without warning, sometimes mid-sentence. Elaine told me later that I'd sleep for hours, then wake up confused, then fall back asleep again. The few memories I have from this period are fragmented and hazy, like trying to remember a dream that's slipping away. On the 3rd day, things changed. I was drifting in and out on the couch, aware that Elaine had gone to the kitchen to make soup when I first noticed them. At first, I thought I was dreaming. That weird, lucid kind of dream where you think you're awake but aren't. There was a woman standing by our fireplace, mid-30s, dark hair, wearing a blue dress. She was looking right at me, her mouth moving but no sound coming out. I blinked hard, expecting her to disappear. She didn't. Instead, I suddenly could hear her voice, crystal clear. "Please," she was saying, "please tell Mike I didn't mean to leave him like that. Tell him it wasn't his fault." Before I could process what was happening, I realized she wasn't alone. There was an old man in the corner by the bookshelf, a teenage boy near the TV, and others, so many others, filling every empty space in our living room. Some were clear and solid-looking, others faint, like bad television reception. They were all talking at once, their voices overlapping in a cacophony that made my already pounding head feel like it might explode. "I need to find my daughter. Tell them where the papers are. Por favor, mi familia. I never meant to hurt anyone." I closed my eyes tight and pressed my hands against my ears. "Please," I begged, "please let me sleep. I just want to sleep." When I opened my eyes again, Elaine was standing in front of me, looking terrified. The soup bowl she'd been carrying was on the floor, its contents spilled across our carpet. "Marcus, who are you talking to?" she asked, her voice shaking. I looked around the room. They were still there, all of them watching me expectantly. Some looked sad, others desperate, a few angry. But they'd fallen silent when Elaine entered. "They won't let me sleep," I told her, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. "I keep asking them to please let me sleep." "Who, Marcus? Who won't let you sleep?" The fear in her voice cut through my fog. I gestured weakly around the room. "Dead people. I keep seeing dead people. They're here in the living room." I'll never forget the look on her face, that mixture of terror and concern that told me she couldn't see what I was seeing. Part of me wondered if I'd finally lost my mind. Maybe the infection had spread to my brain. Maybe I was hallucinating from the fever, but they looked so real, so solid. "What do they want?" Elaine asked, cautiously sitting beside me, her eyes darting around the empty room. Empty to her, at least. They want me to deliver messages, I explained, watching as a young woman with a terrible burn scar on her face moved closer. They want me to tell their families things, but I don't know these people. I don't know how to find their families. Many of them were speaking Spanish, which made sense in Riverside, where our neighborhood is predominantly Hispanic. I tried to explain to them, in my limited Spanish from high school, "Lo siento, no entiendo bien," but they just kept talking, growing more insistent. I turned to a man in a postal uniform who was repeating something about his wife and a safety deposit box. "I just want to sleep," I told him. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you." Elaine's cool hand on my forehead snapped me back to our conversation. "You're burning up," she said, her voice thick with worry. "We need to get you to the hospital." I remember bits and pieces of the drive to the ER. The spirits, because that's what I believed they were by then, followed us, crowding into the back seat of our car, still talking, still pleading. I kept my eyes closed for most of the journey, but it didn't help. I could still hear them, still sense their presence. The emergency room was a blur of bright lights, concerned faces, and questions I couldn't focus enough to answer. Elaine did most of the talking while I drifted in and out of awareness. At some point they took blood, lots of it, and hooked me up to IVs. The spirits were still there, though fewer in number, as if the hospital setting somehow dampened their ability to reach me. I remember waking up to find a doctor and several nurses huddled around my bed, their expressions grim. The doctor, a woman with short grey hair and kind eyes, was explaining something to Elaine, who had gone pale. "His white blood cell count is 400,000, the doctor was saying. "The normal range is between 4,000 and 11,000. "What does that mean?" Elaine's voice was barely a whisper. "It means his body is fighting something serious. Frankly, I'm astonished he's conscious at all. With numbers this high, he should be in a coma. If not..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. "They diagnosed me with MP leukemia, a severe bloodstream infection that had apparently been raging through my system for weeks. Later, I would learn that the initial antibiotics for the sinus infection had been ineffective, allowing the infection to spread unchecked. By the time I reached the hospital, I was closer to death than anyone realized. That night in the ICU was when it happened. The most intense visitation yet. I was alone in my room, drifting in that strange space between sleep and wakefulness, when the spirits returned. Not just a few this time, but dozens, filling every corner of the small room, their voices creating a symphony of desperation. Among them was a small boy, maybe 7 or 8, with dark curly hair and sad eyes. Unlike the others, he didn't speak. He just stood by my bed, watching me intently. When our eyes met, he reached out and placed his small, cold hand on mine. In that instant, everything changed. The room fell silent. The other spirits stepped back, creating a circle around my bed. The boy's touch sent a jolt through me, not painful but intense, like electricity coursing through my veins. And then, as clearly as if he was speaking aloud, I heard his thoughts in my head. "They sent me to help you understand." The boy's voice echoed in my mind. "The veil is thin for you right now. You stand between worlds." I wanted to ask what he meant, but I couldn't form the words. It was as if my body wasn't mine to control anymore. "When people are this close to crossing over," he continued, "sometimes they can see us, hear us. We don't mean to frighten you, we just need help." I managed to whisper, "Why me?" The boy's expression softened. "Because you can hear us, because you're kind, because you're here." He squeezed my hand gently. "But you're not ready to cross over yet. You need to go back." As he said this, the monitors beside my bed began beeping frantically. The spirits started to fade, like mist burned away by sunlight. The last thing I remember is the boy's sad smile as he released my hand. The next thing I knew, there were doctors and nurses swarming around me, shouting instructions, pushing medications through my IVs. I later learned I'd experienced what they call a code blue. My heart had stopped briefly. According to Elaine, who had been in the waiting room when it happened, I was technically dead for nearly 2 minutes before they brought me back. The strange thing is, after that night, the spirits didn't return. As my condition improved over the next few days, the veil, as the boy had called it, seemed to thicken again, separating me from whatever realm they inhabited. By the time I was discharged a week later, the whole experience had taken on a dreamlike quality, as if it had happened to someone else. Elaine thinks it was the fever, the infection, the medications, all creating hallucinations in my oxygen-deprived brain. The rational part of me wants to believe that too. It's the simpler explanation, isn't it? Just the delusions of a mind pushed to its limits by illness. But sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I find myself straining to hear those voices again. I catch myself scanning empty rooms for figures that aren't there, and I wonder if, for those 3 days when I hovered between life and death, I really did become a whisperer between worlds, a temporary conduit for those who had messages to deliver, but no way to deliver them. I don't have answers. All I know is what I experienced, what I saw and heard, whether it was real or not, doesn't change how real it felt. And sometimes, when I'm drifting off to sleep, I swear I can feel the light touch of a small, cold hand on mine, reminding me that the veil is thinner than we think.